Tamu morning show.
Oh! Young, no more!
The fort is breached and the wagons are burning.
Why doesn't the Prime Minister just say the truth and tell the indigenous peoples that he doesn't give a fuck about their rights?
Free Leonard Peltier. We want to free Palestine.
It's a good day to be indigenous.
KREZ 1680 AM.
Sangi Tamu Turtle Island, welcome to the KREZ 1680 AM morning show. Today is Tuesday, February 6, 2024. Those of you out there with the decolonial calendar already know that today is the International Day of Solidarity with Leonard Peltier and all political prisoners. Today marks the 49th year that Leonard Peltier has been wrongfully imprisoned, making him the longest-serving political prisoner in the United States. Today, may we also remember political prisoners in Palestine and across the world on this International Day of Solidarity. We got weather, headlines, and more lined up on the show, but first we have our eagle eye in the sky over the big eye. How's the traffic, Kai?
Nijoni.
I am everyone who ever died without a voice, or a prayer, or a hope, or a chance.
Leonard Peltier is a Native American activist who has been in prison for more than 46 years, serving 2 consecutive life terms for a crime he maintains he did not commit. In 1977, he was convicted of killing 2 FBI agents, Ronald Williams and Jack Kohler, during a shootout on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. Peltier was a member of the American Indian Movement, AIM, founded in 1968 during the Civil Rights Movement to advocate for the rights of Native Americans. The murders occurred at a time when AIM supporters and residents of Pine Ridge were being intimidated and killed, allegedly by paramilitaries connected to the government. A climate of fear and terror prevailed. After 2 AIM members were acquitted of the killings, the FBI coerced witnesses into saying they saw Peltier shoot the agents. Ballistics evidence that could have aided Leonard's defense was hidden from his lawyers.
The only thing I'm guilty of is struggling for my people. I didn't kill those agents.
It was not a fair trial, the conclusion reached by federal appeals judge Gerald Heaney, who stated, the prosecution withheld evidence favorable to the defendant, and the FBI used improper tactics in extraditing Peltier and otherwise in investigating and trying Peltier's case.
I'll be an old man when I get out. If I get out.
Leonard Peltier spent more than 46 years in prison, some of which was in solitary confinement. He is now 78 years old and in rapidly declining health. There are concerns that he is not receiving adequate medical treatment and his condition could be fatal.
They're giving him the death penalty by leaving him in that type of an environment. The man needs medical treatment. He needs to have access to medical treatment. If they're not going to give medical treatment to him, they need to release him as soon as possible.
Amnesty International is calling on President Biden to grant Leonard Peltier clemency before it's too late. President Biden has a chance to rectify a case that has troubled many people for decades. It's an appeal supported by several Nobel Peace Prize laureates, including the late Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu, and dozens of religious and human rights leaders from the U.S. and around the world. Please join them and add your name to Amnesty's petition to President Biden. It's time to release Leonard Peltier.
And it's interesting, too, that you also talk about getting retirement, and that's, it gets to the kind of questions that I have, because Jack Ryan, who was a former FBI agent and also somebody who refused to investigate a nonviolent political group, he has been the only FBI agent to come out in support of Leonard Peltier. But Ryan wasn't as close to the Peltier case as you were, being stationed here in Minneapolis in the field office, which historically was the office that led most of the FBI surveillance and investigations on the American Indian movement. since the organization, of course, was founded here and headquartered here in the Twin Cities. So you're the first FBI agent close to the case to advocate for Peltier's freedom. That's quite significant. And you've had a long career in the FBI, and you've seen the agency from the inside. So why now? Why come out in support of Leonard Peltier's clemency now?
Well, Jack Ryan and I have a little bit in common. He was closer to COINTELPRO. His career was during the period when it was at its apex. I actually got exposed to those COINTELPRO files in my second office because the National Lawyers Guild had won a lawsuit, a FOIA lawsuit, after 7 years. In all of the files on the National Lawyers Guild that the FBI had been spying on, and in each office there were stacks and stacks and stacks of these files that had to be reviewed and, redacted, with names redacted. So the poor legal counsel in that office had this big stack, and he asked for help. And I started, looking. This is after I only had like 2 years in the FBI. And I started reading those, I had to. I was going helping them go through it. And you realize that I realized, oh my goodness, did they get carried away? I mean, you read about COINTELPRO, spying on Pete Seeger and Burl Ives. It goes to ridiculous lengths. I then, of course, had the opportunity to talk to agents that were old agents that had worked during that period of time, and a lot of them actually warned you never to do this again. I was warned by one
never
agent.
To do COINTELPRO
Yeah,
again.
he goes, well, you know what happens? He says things get carried away, and this is an agent who actually he was already retired. He was working in security and someplace, and I was talking to him, and he goes, just a piece of advice, young lady. What we went through during this period, we really went off the thing. Don't ever do that again. And he goes, there will be times. So he was giving me a warning. One of his supervisors had actually been up on charges, and I don't know for what. Maybe something with Fred Hampton or something. I'm not sure what, but it was something like that. So he was close to people later getting into trouble for having followed orders. And at the time, all of the FBI offices were engaged in this, so nobody thought anything of it, until later on, when things come up and there's an inquiry or something, the church committee, and then you start to worry and say, oh my gosh, we shouldn't have done this. I was warned by retired agents of that, and old agents, and mostly people just laughed about it, because at the time, this was easy work. One of the spying operation.
What do you mean easy work?
It was very easy. Okay, in the FBI, you have 300 some different categories of federal crimes. Everything from violent crime, could be violent gangs, fugitive matters, people that have already killed a couple of people. Dangerous work. Anytime you're working violent crime, it's very, very dangerous. Okay, so spying on Pete Seeger, the communists meeting in a house, you drove by and got their license plates. And if you ever go through those files in FOIA, you'll see that this is how it was. It was called post and float. So the agents laughed. This is why they laughed, because if they just posted a surveillance or some other document in the file, then they were fine. They didn't even have to do any, that this was easy work, and it was not dangerous. So it was just kind of driving around, looking at people, following, maybe even following, but and then gathering background. Of course, if you were an undercover or something and actually infiltrated, I suppose it could be a little bit different, but there was maybe some of that. But most of it was, that kind of thing. So most of the agents just laughed about this having gotten carried away, unless they somehow had gotten into trouble. And as the FBI always chooses a certain crime program to be their priority. People know that before 9/11, Ashcroft, the Attorney General Ashcroft, chose violent crime to be his priority. The reason he chose it is because he wanted to reinstate the death penalty. And he put terrorism as the lowest priority. So, people that are kind of conspiracy-minded think that was deliberate. No, he didn't realize that the terrorism would become such a big thing and that he could get death penalties through terrorism prosecutions. So in August, a month before 9/11, he ranked terrorism as the lowest priority of the FBI, and violent crime is the highest priority. So every AG is a political figure, and they do this. And usually the FBI directors obviously follow along. And Washington, D.C. is very politicized that way. So going back to the question of
why now?
Why now? Okay, so a couple of reasons. Someone sent me Ray's letter, which had either leaked out or something, because it was not intended to be made public, is my understanding. Of course, when I read that letter, and he cites the FBI family at least 2 or 3 times in that letter, it brings back the fact that we were all very indoctrinated. Even in 1981, January, February of 1981, when I went through FBI training school, there were lectures on that reviewed the FBI's version of the facts.
Of the Peltier case.
Of the Leonard Peltier case. And in gory detail with slides.
So this was a formal curriculum?
Well, the formal curriculum at Quantico is just 3 things. Firearms training, academic, like legal training, and physical fitness. But like in firearms training, so this was actually during firearms training, and I think it came up in others, and maybe some others as well. But in firearms training, like if it was too cold or sleeting or something, we couldn't go outside to practice shooting, they spent hours going through the Leonard Peltier case, more than once. And I said with actually gory slides, because it was a very, very sad ambush, and there's horrible pictures about the whole thing. So so that goes all the way back to training school, and then throughout the years, the FBI family. It sounds good, everybody. People make up nice euphemistic terms like a family for something that really is pretty dangerous. Which Hannah Arendt, came up with the theory of the banality of evil. How did otherwise good Germans become these monsters? And when you're involved with group loyalty, nothing closer than a family, of course. This is the same thing in police work. So, the blue code of silence. So you get group loyalty. We think of it as a good thing, loyalty to your friends, to your family, but it also can be the thing that blinds people emotionally to being objective and to basically to right and wrong. I mean, it's all throughout history this is the case. And so Hoover, going back to J. Edgar Hoover, which was way before my time, when I was a whistleblower, people sent me Hoover's loyalty poem. Hoover had plastered this, Elliot Hubbard, I think is the author of it, but it's called The Loyalty. It's, the Nazis had this similar thing, and it's about loyalty above everything. Okay, so that poem was on the walls of FBI headquarters during Hoover's terms. And when I spoke out about 9/11, and you're not telling the truth about 9/11, I was sent the poem, the loyalty poem. So, I mean, I'm only touching on the surface of this problem of groupthink, group loyalty, and of course, citing the FBI family is a main way that this is done. It bonds everybody into an us versus them mode of thinking. Like in police, this happens all the time in the police. We're the good guys. We have a noble cause. Maybe we can cut some corners if we can't prove the case. I mean, there are books written about the blue code of silence. And maybe if somebody in our group loses their temper and uses violence, we're all going to keep quiet about it because we're in a quasi-war and we're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Well, this absolutely pervades police work. It pervades military. And so I thought it was, that jumped out at me. That's one of the reasons why I thought. Then the other thing, of course, is just the passage of time. I've been retired now for 18 years. So towards the end of when I was the legal counsel in the 1990s, I mean, Leonard Peltier had been in jail for, 30 years or something like that, 25, 30. I mean, but now it's nearly 50 years. And because of that, it really is not in sync with any other murder prosecution. Most of, it's an average, convictions now carry an average prison term of about 16 years. And I was well aware of this horrible case of the FBI agent who murdered his informant, female informant, and drove with her body in his FBI trunk for 2 or 3 days.
That was Putnam.
Mark Putnam.
Mark
I was aware of that case. That was also talked about quite a bit. And he only served 10 years. So you have this contrast. And I thought, well, this is about the time where mercy and the real reasons for having criminal justice. Of course, the reason I joined the FBI, that I learned in law school. 4 reasons. One is accountability, which is kind of a revenge accountability thing. The other one is to prevent recidivism, to create an example so people know, so that there's less other crime. People don't follow that example because there's accountability. And the last one is rehabilitation. And so if there's no danger to the public from recidivists, and certainly when people become, when their health deteriorates and their whatever, it's almost always the case that they are able to pardon. And so when you see this letter and it kind of jumps out you, well, after nearly 50 years, and there's no mercy and these other, and basically it is just now very vindictive case.
Because of the conditions of COVID in the prison, he says they are turning an already harsh environment into an asylum. And for many who did not receive a death penalty, we are now staring down the face of one. And so that was just under the conditions of the lockdown. And then he got COVID. And he's elderly. He has, his diabetes. He has a heart issue, a heart disease. His health is already ailing. And actually, the criteria for having your sentence commuted, ailing health, having served enough time, having served a lot of time already in prison, those are 2 criteria for getting your sentence commuted. And the only person who can do that is President Biden. And so there's been incredible mobilization. Ruth Buffalo, who is a Democrat in the House of Representatives in the state of North Dakota, she spearheaded an October 26th letter from, I believe it's called like the Native American Caucus of like Native state legislators or something like that, or the council, 20, including some like Benny Shendo, some Native legislators from the state of New Mexico. They signed on to this letter urging Biden to commute Peltier's sentence for these reasons. A number of congressional members under the leadership of a Democratic representative from the 3rd District of Arizona, Raul Grijalva. I forgot the number. Maybe it was somewhere between like 10 to 20. Congressional members also wrote a letter on October 8th of 2021 urging President Biden to commute Peltier's sentence for these reasons. And so this kind of all started because like this James Reynolds, the cop, prosecutors are cops, the cop who helped to prosecute Peltier was just like, yeah, his sentence should be commuted. Like, and he should get a retrial because like today in the climate apparently, around like the ethics of evidence and trials, apparently the way that like the evidence that Peltier was convicted on would not hold any water apparently in a court today. And Peltier just issued a statement this week, I think like 2 days ago, where he wants a trial. He wants a new trial. And so the tactics, I mean, he went through several appeals. All of the appeals have been denied over the years. So it's either at this point his sentence just gets commuted by Biden, or he gets another trial, right? And apparently, according to the law and just basic like constitutional rights, he has a right to a trial, because the evidence is irrefutable that what he was convicted on was not only there was gross misconduct by the prosecution, there was intimidation of witnesses, there was withholding of key evidence, evidence that would probably have meant that he would not have been charged of those crimes. And the fact that his co-defendants were found not guilty by means of self-defense. and yet he somehow was not allowed to have that argument, that he was acting in self-defense. Apparently there's some ballistics evidence that shows irrefutably that the gun that he had that day did not match the bullets that were actually found to have killed those agents. And so there is like actual real evidence that has been revealed that proves his innocence. I mean, quite frankly. But he's not allowed to get a trial, and there's no political will from these Democrats. I mean, Trump almost did. I guess there was like a last hour attempt by Peltier's current pro bono lawyer, Kevin Sharp, and like Kim Kardashian, if you guys remember this. Anyway, to get Peltier, his sentence commuted by Trump. And really the reason why, Peltier has been in prison for this long and his sentence hasn't been commuted by, what is it now? It's Clinton, Obama, and Trump, is because of the FBI. The FBI issued a statement yesterday, still maintaining, just like using hyperbole, maintaining like this, like, what is it? The Blue Lives Matter kind of bullshit. Saying that, like, the lives of these FBI agents were like brutally taken by Leonard Peltier, like he's an animal, like he's this terrible person who deserves to die in jail. I mean, I'm just like obviously kind of paraphrasing and ad-libbing off of it, but the FBI continues to maintain this kind of like Blue Lives Matter line about it, even though the actual facts of the case, it's very clear that Peltier should have been a mistrial, and that there's actual evidence demonstrating that he did not commit this crime. And so the only explanation, right, is that he was vilified and he was put in prison, in a symbolic gesture to Native revolutionaries everywhere, right? Yeah. Just being like, well, if you stand up against the United States, this is what's going to happen to you, right? And
one of the most heartbreaking things to me over all these years is, well, at least the last 20 years, is that if he simply admitted that he had done it, or if he lied and said that he had done it, he would have been eligible for parole, and he probably would have been paroled. But he's not going to admit to something he didn't do.
Yeah.
And that's just fucked up. I mean, it's fucked up that if he was to lie, they'd let him out. But because he has ethics, they won't let him out.
Yeah. Because he's like, no, I'm not going to admit to something I didn't do. What, like a strong person to do that, even though he has suffered for 46 years. He's the longest standing political prisoner in U.S. history. So I think it's important to point that out, that it's an indigenous revolutionary who is the longest standing political prisoner in U.S. history. Not a coincidence, given what we know about the incredible threat that indigenous liberation poses to U.S. settler order and just the existence of the United States, period. And he was also, I think, other facts from the case, he was also basically charged, like all of the documents from the prosecution have been reviewed, right? Have been reviewed over the years. And he was essentially convicted because he was present at the scene of a crime. And there was actually no evidence that he committed the crime. And then his co-defendants were let off on the argument of self-defense. And this Reynolds guy, one of his prosecutors, wrote, he said that, quote, he keeps thinking about how Peltier was charged with murder for being present during a violent scene where people were killed. The same circumstances for hundreds of Trump supporters during the Capitol attack on January 6th, except they all just went home afterward. And if you were to use the same logic for all of those people, they would all be charged with murder? They would all be charged with murder.
Yeah, because cops died.
Because cops died that day. FBI agents are cops. Because cops died that day, right? But, of course, those individuals are not going to be charged with murder, right? And there's been this, like, the whole fiasco in this, like, weird theater in U.S. media and the Congress about trying to get Trump impeached or whatever that was. Like, I actually didn't pay a lot of attention to that kind of stuff surrounding the inquiry into January 6th. And yet, so there's just so much, there's so much lying, and there's just so much like willful concealing and threat that has gone into keeping Peltier in prison. And I guess in a way, this is very expected that cops would act this way, or that the United States would act this way, given how much they hated the American Indian movement. I understand, like, AIM was a very organized revolutionary force that really took Indigenous liberation seriously in that particular moment in history, and really posed like a real challenge to U.S. supremacy, and continues to, I think, in the hearts of those of us who very much appreciate and respect what AIM represented. I guess what really, and so in that sense, I understand why Biden would be scared. I understand why, you know, the FBI would refuse to let go of this narrative around Peltier all these years. Like, if you understand how cop logic works, then this is just basically cop logic on a really big scale, essentially. And why the FBI is holding this up, and why Biden would probably be a little bit scared, even though he's been issuing apologies, and he got Deb Haaland into the Secretary of Interior position, and he's been doing all of these, like, he's been throwing money at Native people. He's like, yes, Native people are wonderful. I love Indians, except for when you're a revolutionary. You know, he's like, well, when you're combating the United States, I don't know. You might still need to be punished. I might need to send a clear message that you're a bad Indian. Talking about the good Indians and bad Indians. He's like rewards good Indians, but he, you know, Leonard Peltier just represents the bad Indians, you know, of the world, the red nations and the AIMs. So it makes sense to me why the state is still acting this way. I think what disturbs me is when I see activists acting this way, or other Native people. And there has been, I think it's partly because the American Indian movement has been really discredited. I think over the last 15 to 20 years, I think the misogyny, right? And just like the way that Indigenous feminism, I think, in the 21st century has really transformed the landscape and the values of Indigenous movements, specifically in the United States, the critique of male leadership, the critique of misogyny, those things make a lot of sense, and I think they're incredibly important, you know, to strengthen our movements. What I think is a little bit concerning to me is when Indigenous feminism is used to, like, vilify and to discredit other Indigenous revolutionaries, to make claims that somehow, like, if AIM was too misogynist, then we just need to discount it as any type of revolutionary formation that existed or had any impact. And that's not true. That's historically not true. But then that also, like, erases and invisibilizes, like, the Native women who led AIM. I'm thinking like Madonna Thunderhawk. I'm thinking Women of All Red Nations. I'm thinking about the legacy of survival schools. And the women, just like the women who saw AIM as like a tool of liberation and like fully supported AIM and worked with AIM, and made that choice. And so, you know, I'm saying this because, you know, the case of Anna Mae Aquash and her assassination has been so strongly tied to Peltier's clemency case, to the point where I still see people saying, like, he needs to stay in prison because he murdered her, because he murdered Anna Mae Aquash. And, you know, in this current era where Indigenous feminism, I think, again, has really become a much more prominent feature of Indigenous liberation struggles, you know, you have people who are advocates for ending MMIWG, right? Murdered and Missing Indigenous Women. She is an MMIWG. She absolutely is. As are all of the other women of AIM who were murdered, actually, because of their revolutionary struggle, just like her. You know, during that time, there's like 60 or 70 AIM members who were assassinated. Many whose names we don't know, but we know Anna Mae's name, and that's important, and she deserves justice. But so do all of those other people who were murdered because of their commitment to Indigenous revolution. And so does Peltier deserve justice for the egregious injustice that has been committed against him. And it's important, I think, also just fact-based issues. Like, let's take the Indigenous feminist lens out of this right now and just look at the facts, that there's also overwhelming, irrefutable evidence that Peltier was not involved in her murder. I mean, it's documented, actually. And so we need to be able to see like the suffering that Peltier has endured at the hands of the U.S. settler state as separate. It's related to the suffering that Anna Mae Aquash endured and that all of those AIM members endure and that Indigenous water protectors and revolutionaries continue to endure. It's related, right? Because we're all standing up against our occupier and our oppressor, and they're going to do anything that they need to do to suppress the revolutionary struggle that we carry in our hearts and our spirits, right? Because it's incredibly threatening to them, especially Indigenous people, because we were here first. You know, we have a moral claim to authority and to the land here. So in that sense, they're all connected. But justice for Anna Mae is not connected to justice for Peltier. They're just not. And they need to be understood as separate cases that have separate facts attached to them. And that if you're advocating for the clemency of Peltier as somebody who really believes, who's like an Indigenous feminist, right? As somebody who believes in how we need to abolish MMIWG, that it's not a contradiction, and that you're not somehow like selling out like justice for Native women who've been violated by AIM members or by white men or, you know, any Native woman who's experienced violence. You're not selling out that movement by trying to get Leonard free from prison. I promise you're not doing it. The facts fully support the fact that he was framed and criminalized and that he has been imprisoned symbolically to make all of the rest of us afraid to rise up against our occupier and our oppressor. And there's like a ton of information you can find online about this that just states the facts very clearly about how those cases are not related, and that all of our relatives, Aquash, Peltier, all of our murdered revolutionaries from AIM, they all deserve justice. They absolutely deserve justice, and we should keep fighting for that justice. But advocating for Peltier's release and the commutation of his sentence, it doesn't mean that you're being a bad feminist.
Just 2 years after the occupation of Wounded Knee by the American Indian movement and residents of the Oglala Nation, a reign of terror brought violence and death in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. On June 26, 1975, 2 FBI agents were killed at the Jumping Bull property. They died within 10 minutes of the shooting, and their deaths triggered a nationwide manhunt and sparked several hours of gunfire that left Joe Stuntz dead and another imprisoned for life. While his co-defendants, Dino Butler and Bob Rubidoux, were found not guilty by reason of self-defense, Leonard Peltier was charged with the murder of the 2 FBI agents and is currently sitting 2 consecutive life sentences in federal prison. Each year, members of the Oglala Nation and residents of the Oglala community get together and remember the sad events that transpired that day. And they remember those who were killed, such as Joe Stuntz, and those who died in the aftermath of the reign of terror, such as Anna Mae Aquash. Youth runners make a journey from Camp Justice, which was a camp created by Lakota mothers in protest of alcohol sales in the White Clay community, and the runners run to the cemetery where Joe Stuntz and Anna Mae Aquash were buried. While the rest of the nation has moved on from the tragic events of that day and the so-called reign of terror that brought death and destruction to the reservation community in the wake of the Wounded Knee occupation, the wounds are still fresh in the minds of many of the Oglala residents. The events are as much somber in commemoration of those who lost their lives as they are celebratory for the victories that were achieved. It was here in this humble community that began an international movement that led to the adoption of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People in 2007. And it's important to remember that the sacrifices that members of the American Indian movement, as well as their supporters, made for Indigenous peoples to receive that kind of recognition for human rights, as well as for treaty rights. And while Leonard Peltier sits behind bars to this day, the investigations of the murders of Joe Stuntz still remain unsolved or uninvestigated, as well as dozens of other Lakota and Dakota, as well as other Native peoples' deaths remain uninvestigated by the Federal Bureau of Investigations or the federal government itself. Lisa Bellinger is an Anishinaabe
activist and educator in the Twin Cities of Minnesota. She's also a member of the American Indian Movement and sits on the American Indian Movement's Grand Governing Council. Her mother was Patricia Bellinger, who was one of the co-founders of the American Indian Movement in 1968.
Come on, Bushu! In the way, Magadi Duck, Matakara. Relatives, I would like to say greetings to you from the AIM Grand Governing Council. I was raised to be the new, or listed, or whatever, however you want to call it, be the new director for AIM. Our international chapter, we're here to support the family, support Leonard Peltier, who is one of my fellow Anishinaabe relatives, one of our grandfathers, our elder. I've been here a few times before. I grew up with my uncles Clyde and Vernon. And we want to make sure that, we are continuing the work that our leaders have put in place for us. One of the last things my Uncle Clyde said was, don't give up, just like what was said here earlier. Never give up. So this fall, what we're going to be organizing, we're working on is another walk for Leonard. It's a walk, Leonard Peltier Walk to Justice. It'll start out in Minneapolis on September 1st. Ceremonies will begin August 31st, and then we'll walk to Washington, D.C., arriving there November 14th. And we want to invite you to join us to continue this walk, to continue the work, to continue to raise awareness in the campaign to free our elders. We mustn't give up. We must keep going. We have our Peltier Defense Committee. We have AIM chapters across Turtle Island, Canada, U.S. And to our young people, our up-and-coming young people, our up-and-coming young AIMsters, culture, tradition, and language. That's what Uncle Clyde always talked about. So I want to say miigwech for the beautiful songs and the prayers. And if you have any questions, Rachel, one of our up-and-coming young leaders, our young women leaders here, Rachel Thunder, who is leading the organization of the walk. So if you have any questions about the walk, come and talk to Rachel, and she'll be happy to share any information. We have a Facebook page, an event page, so you can find us on Facebook.
It's 800
Thank you. Don't go too far, guys, because we're going to have you sing a song in between each of the speakers. And so it's my honor to introduce our first speaker, Kathy Peltier, youngest daughter of Leonard Peltier. And it's an honor to have her here, and her mom. So we're going to hear her words and what she wants to share here today. So thank you, Kathy. Go ahead.
Yat e she Kathy Dennis about Peltier, yeah.
She'enakai Dinesh Knekto Turnamountain Do Oga Lakota. Shema A. Ambige Shija A. Leonard Peltier. Good evening, everybody. My name is Kathy Peltier. As Rachel said, I am the youngest daughter of Leonard Peltier. The shootout happened on June 25th, 1975. I wasn't even born when the whole shootout took place. I was, my mom was in another state with me when I wasn't born and the shootout took place. I was born November 2nd, 1975. The first time my dad ever got to see me was when he was on trial, and that was in 1977. He only got to see a glimpse of me as a 2-year-old. I've been speaking about my dad since I could speak. And every time it gets easier to talk about it because we know in our heart that our dad is free. I mean, he's innocent. And in that sense, it's easier to talk about him. But to see my dad in prison for over 4 decades, missing his children grow up. My brother Chauncey was 10 years old when the shootout happened. He missed out on having our dad teach him what fathers would normally teach their children. Me, on the other hand, I never got to know my dad as my brother did. The last time I saw my dad was 2 years ago. And before that was 20 years ago. And the only reason why is because they kept on moving him from prison to prison. And every time I would fill out the forms to go see him, they would move him. And it was from Coleman, Florida to Pennsylvania. And it was very emotional when I saw my dad after 20 years. Because I remember the bad memories I had seen him in prison when I was a kid. We had to act straight. We had to behave. We couldn't act out like a lot of these little kids did. If we did, we were removed. So we had to be on our straight behavior. So sometimes we didn't get to see our dad. And then we had to share time with his lawyers and his paralegals. And that was hard enough because he only got like 48 hours a month at the Leavenworth Penitentiary. So I am so glad that when I got to meet Rachel 2 years ago and she approached me and said, I want to do this for your dad. I was all excited because, you know, I've been telling people it's good because the new generation needs to know all these movements that were out there that helped them succeed in life. So we need to talk about all these political people, the political prisoners. It's just not my dad, but every culture too. So I wanted to say thank you for coming for those, and wanted to say thank you to Rachel for approaching me. Thank you.
Rachel Thunder. I just said hello and thank you to each of you individually and to all of you collectively. I'm Plains Cree, Treaty 6, Nihiwak. My name is Rachel Thunder. I'm the director for the American Indian Movement, the True People of Indiana and Kentucky, and I'm the lead organizer for the Walk to Justice. The Walk to Justice You know, it just started on September the 1st in Minneapolis, Minnesota, 2.5 months ago. It's 1,103 miles. And we just completed this last mile today. We walked from that Washington Monument to right here where we're standing now, demanding and asking for clemency for our elder, for Elder Leonard Peltier, that it's time that they let him go. This walk, it really started, though, about 2 years ago. There were those of us in the movement that were having dreams about our elder, Leonard Peltier, that's been locked up for 47 years. He's the longest held Indigenous political prisoner held by the United States government. These dreams, they were coming to us, the women of the Grand Governing Council. And some of the dreams that I was having, I can speak on those. I would be in Leonard's prison cell with him. And he would be sitting on his bed with his face in his hands, and he wouldn't say anything. And I would say to him, "Don't worry, your people haven't forgotten about you. Don't worry, your people are coming to get you. Don't worry, AIM is coming to get you." So these dreams, they kept coming, right? And we took these dreams, we took them into prayer, and we took them into ceremony. And through those prayers and through those ceremonies, that's how it came in that we were to walk. That we were to walk as the American Indian movement from the heart of the movement in Minneapolis, Minnesota to Washington, D.C., to these people that are here in these positions of influence and power to let our elder go. I've spent a lot of time these past weeks thinking about justice. This is the walk to justice, but what is justice? Justice, the definition of justice is just behavior and treatment. We marched to the Supreme Court the other day for the ICWA rally, for their opening arguments for the Indian Child Welfare Act. And I saw there on the top of the Supreme Court, it said equal justice under law. Under their law. Our people follow natural law. Our people have been following natural law for thousands of years. Our people have been here since the beginning of time. This law, the system that they oppress on us, has only been here for 530 years. To me, justice embodies honor. To me, justice embodies integrity. To me, justice embodies fairness. But I ask you, and I ask this system, where is the honor in taking our children? Where is the integrity of protecting our women and our elders? Our missing, murdered Indigenous women and people? Where is the fairness when we're above 38% of the national average for incarceration rates? So where's the justice? That's why we called this walk the walk to justice, because of course we're asking for justice for our elder. But we're asking for justice for our people. Because just like in those dreams I was having where I was in Leonard's prison cell with him, there's a piece of every single one of us that is still in that prison cell with him as long as he's still held. This walk, it's a prayer and it's a ceremony, and that's how we've treated it the entire time. We've stayed grounded in that way. This walk, we did it in that way, in that traditional way, to carry this prayer here, and we suffered for it. It's not easy. It's not easy to walk 1,103 miles. It's not easily mentally or spiritually or physically or emotionally. But that suffering doesn't compare at all to the suffering that Leonard Peltier has endured for 47 years. That suffering doesn't compare at all to what the family has been through. his children, his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren. And that's what we're here asking for. Yeah, we're asking for clemency. We're asking for him to be able to be with his people, to go to ceremony, to hear the drum, to walk free on our Mother Earth, to be able to hold his children and his grandchildren, his great-grandchildren that he's never met. That's what we're asking as the American Indian Movement. What is AIM? What is the American Indian Movement? To me, the American Indian Movement has existed far longer than 1968. The American Indian Movement has existed since these settlers, these colonizers, that way of thinking, that way of oppression arrived on these shores over 530 years ago. AIM has always been here to help fight colonization. Thinking a lot about the past and present. Was thinking a lot about the words of Russ Means and Dennis Banks and Clyde Belcourt and John Trudell. Listening to their words and their speeches and just how relevant they were then and now. How Leonard was locked up then and now. And so a part of this walk has been bringing together that past and this present. To ignite that fire in the people and the communities, to ask for our elder to be released. I've never been here to Washington, D.C. This is my first time here. This system, this place that I've always heard so much about. And honestly, when we walked to the Supreme Court and I saw the Capitol, this system is fragile. This is nothing. This is a facade that they create with their propaganda and their misinformation and this image that they create of this power that they have. The real power is this land. And the real power is in the indigenous people of this land. So we carried this prayer here, and I want to, acknowledge all of those walkers and those runners that were a part of this prayer. The way that they carried this so honorably and respectfully and humbly. And so we want to take the time to ask anybody that was a part of walking or running that they come here and they stand here on these steps. We're going to honor them now. So I'm calling on those walkers and those runners to come here and the Eagle staffs to come down. Until Leonard Peltier is free, none of us are free. AIM is coming for you, Leonard. Your people are coming for you, Leonard.
I just want to say it's a really beautiful day to be here in Piscataway land, on indigenous land. We're here not to just beg for Leonard Peltier. They think that we come to Washington, D.C., to a place that's named after a man that Haudenosaunee people call Town Destroyer, to beg. But they have it wrong. We're here to tell you what is right. People who speak truth do not beg power. They speak truth to power. And all of you, we are power. Not these monuments to white supremacy. Not this monument to a genocider who killed Dakota people. We started this walk in Minneapolis in November of 1972. The Trail of Broken Treaties came to Washington, D.C. to meet with the president with a position paper with 22 points for treaty rights, for health care, to protect children. And they were rebuffed. by the Nixon administration, who cared more about waging a war in Vietnam than he cared about the people here, the original indigenous people here in this country. And so they took over the Bureau of Indian Affairs when the president refused to meet with them. And they occupied the building for about a week. And in that building, they found the evidence of the crime, of the mismanagement of millions of dollars in lease money for Indian land, for all the children that had been taken from their families, the mismanagement of the Indian health services, all these things that are protected not just by treaties, but by the Constitution, a document that was written before the treaties, that's much older than our treaties, where it says that treaties are the supreme law of the land, Article 6. And in those documents, they found the mismanagement, the centuries of mismanagement by the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Trail of Broken Treaties Manifesto also became the framework for the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. It launched the international indigenous movement at the United Nations. That began here 50 years ago today. Ask yourself why they venerate a genocider and why they don't venerate our heroes of indigenous resistance. Leonard Peltier was part of the Trail of Broken Treaties. He was in what they called the Native American Embassy 50 years ago today. They didn't have guns. They didn't have anything. All they had was their prayer and their truth. But they were evicted, and then began the surveillance by the FBI. So when we talk about the American Indian movement, the Red Power movement, the Trail of Broken Treaties, that history is still relevant today. Leonard Peltier was taken from his family by Indian agents and put into a boarding school. The Indian Child Welfare Act, at the time it was passed in 1978, was meant to protect Native children, to reverse the process of Indian child removal. And in their findings in congressional hearings here, where we're at, they found that anywhere between 25% to 35% of Native children during that time when that bill was passed have been adopted out to white families or foster care systems. Imagine a quarter of our people have been adopted out, taken from their families. And now we have 9 unelected judges trying to adjudicate what that means, what indigenous sovereignty means. In some ways, this system is moving backwards as we, as indigenous people, are trying to move forwards. Standing Rock was a turning point for us. We have one of our good relatives, a water protector here, who can speak to that. Even when we don't take up guns, even when we stand in prayer, we're still considered criminals. Much like our Dakota patriots who this man killed. We're still considered criminals to this day because a report found last year that a quarter of carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions coming from the United States and Canada were being challenged by indigenous-led movements. We are punching way above our weight class when it comes to being good ancestors for future generations and preventing climate change. They don't care about Native children. They don't care about indigenous rights. What they care about is their bottom line, which is money. The lawyers who are arguing that case to overturn the Indian Child Welfare Act, they're from the Gibson Dunn law firm, which represents oil companies. How many pieces of legislation have gone through state legislators to criminalize being a water protector? How many times have we sat before lawyers sitting on the other side saying, did you witness a violent act when you were at Standing Rock? Did you participate in direct action? Are you a water protector? Hell yeah, I'm a water protector. But they want us to be ashamed of that history. They want us to be ashamed of Leonard Peltier. They want Leonard Peltier, our history as Indigenous people is locked up with him right now. Obama was a coward for not letting him out. So too was Clinton. I was here in 2016. A lot of us were here in 2016. Leonard's son died here in 2016 trying to get his dad out of prison. Anything that happens, every single day that he sits in jail, the blood and the guilt is not on our hands. It's on Biden's hands. He could change this today with a phone call. It's gross and it's disgusting that we have to come here and explain this to people. But our truth is more powerful than their vanity, than their greed, and it's more powerful than their hate for us. Because we know that each one of you is going to go back and do more than just beg on the colonizer's shoulder and cry and ask for our land back. Stop taking our children. When has that ever worked? We have to fight back. We have to organize. We have to turn to each other. We have to create a new system from the ground up. One that reflects Indigenous values. Because otherwise, we're not going to have an earth to live on. It's not a matter of becoming Indigenous. It's not a matter of whether or not you think that our truth is the truth. Because tomorrow won't come if you don't listen to us today. We won't have a planet tomorrow if we keep doing what we're doing right now. And that's what Leonard Peltier represents. That's why he's a threat to this system.
There was an elder, there was a language advocate, there was an educator, philosopher named Albert Whitehat from Sicango territory. And there's a phrase that he brought back. Well, there's a phrase that he taught folks. Nake nula wa'u. Nake nula wa'u. I'm always ready, always prepared. When someone needs us to stand up in defense of the sacred, I'm ready to be there. When you need us to stand up for those that need help, we're there. So I want you to say that with me. Nake nula wa'u. Nake nula wa'u. Nake nula wa'u. Nake nula wa'u. Wherever, we're always ready. This is what you see in front of you. I want to recognize Chauncey for being here, Peltier's son. I want to ask our first speaker to come on up. Nick Tilson is President and CEO of Indian Collective. Nick is a third-generation activist in the fight to free Leonard Peltier. Indian Collective is a national Indigenous-led organization dedicated to building Indigenous power. Please welcome, join me in welcoming Nick Tilson.
Amadakiapi, Nick Tilson Amachiapi, Chantel Washtanepe Chuzapelo. It's good to see each and every one of you here today. I stand up here with my daughter, Shayla, who would be the fourth generation fighting for Leonard Peltier's freedom. My family came into this movement. My family came into this movement in 1973 at the occupation at Wounded Knee. And I lived 3 miles down the road from Wounded Knee in Porcupine, South Dakota, on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And Leonard Peltier's incarceration, his illegal incarceration, is a representation of all of the injustices that have been done to Indigenous people.
Amen.
When the United States government and the FBI decided to wage a war on the American Indian movement, they attacked Leonard Peltier. They used all the resources available to them in the biggest manhunt in the history of the FBI to defuse our movement, to defuse the Indigenous people's movement from rising up and fighting for our self-determination. And over the last 48 years, we as a movement and as a people have seen great advancements in the rights of indigenous people in this country. Fishing rights, land back, education, many of these things and many of these policies were created because the conditions were created by the American Indian movement for these things to happen. But one of our relatives, Leonard Peltier, has not been able to benefit from those changes, has not been able to benefit from the very things that he fought for, from the very movement that he sacrificed to build. And so we come together here to remind the United States that Leonard Peltier is the longest incarcerated political prisoner in the history of the United States. And it's a reminder of how they treat the indigenous people of this land, how they treat us. So his release not only represents his liberation, but it represents all of our indigenous people's liberation bound up with him. And so I ask all of us to continue, and those of you that are at home, we cannot let his fight for freedom go quietly. It's time. 48 years is long enough. We are calling on the Biden administration, who has made it a choice, has made indigenous civil rights a priority for his administration, yet he allows and continues to allow the longest incarcerated political prisoner in the United States. We need to see action now. Yeah. Release Leonard Peltier. That's it, Fiona.
So we hope that you can hear us. What I'm trying to explain is we have one more speaker left. She is going to be bringing us a message from Native political prisoner Leonard Peltier. And while she is speaking, there are going to be people with a red shawl moving through the crowd to collect any cash donations that you may have for the ongoing many years of defense and work for Leonard Peltier to try to get him free. And we're going to tell you more about his case if you don't know about his case. And we also want everybody to know, especially live stream people, but anybody else here, that you can go to freeleonardpeltiernow.org and get more information and make donations there as well if you do not have cash to donate today. I hope some folks heard me over here. And our next speaker is Charlie Naru, and she's loud too. So, because at UAIN, we really like loud people. So, welcome, Charlie.
Taigwei, see, I am loud. Taigwei di ituno kena diatia ono diri chalinaru boriken taino daka kena guainia yukayeke boriken United Confederation of Taino People Cabos Yaha. Now let me put my eyes on. Yo, girl. Okay. All right. Okay. I wanted to begin sharing a few words in my indigenous language, which is not English nor Spanish or any other colonial language. I was taught by my elders that it is respectful to begin in this way. So in translation, good day, my brothers and sisters. My name is Chali Naru. I am a citizen of the Guainia Taino tribe. I am a liaison of the United Confederation of Taino People, and I am so happy and honored to be here with all of you today. Ha home. As a Taino woman, a mother, and grandmother, yeah, I am a BB, and a Massachusetts representative of the United Confederation of Taino People, I stand here in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of these lands and our allies. We Taino people know what it is like to have settler days forced upon us. Last month, the U.S. celebrated the coming of the Christ-bearing colonizer Christopher Columbus to this side of the world. Children in grade schools are introduced to this whitewashed version of history every year with no understanding of the pain he and his crew caused my ancestors. This is an injustice, just as the whitewashed version of the so-called Thanksgiving holiday is an injustice to the memory of these ancestors of the indigenous peoples of this land. Thanksgiving, really? More like Takesgiving. As Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, an injustice anywhere is an injustice everywhere. In closing, we, the United Confederation of Taino People, remain thankful for those who work so hard to offer alternatives to these false histories like the National Day of Mourning and Indigenous Peoples Day across the country. As Indigenous peoples, we are resilient and we're still here. I am proud to stand here with you again and say, Seneko Kakona, abundant blessings to all. Ha home. Thank you. We have a statement to National Day of Mourning, once again from our beloved brother, native political prisoner Leonard Peltier. As we are speaking, we will have some people moving through the crowd with red shawl, just like Matwi said. Please make a donation for the benefit of Leonard's Defense Committee if you can. If you are watching on the live stream, you can go to the website freeleonardpeltiernow.org to make an online donation. Thanks to Talia Yarina Caro Cachimuel from NDN Collective for providing us with an update about Leonard's case. She, unfortunately, could not be here because she had to travel early to preliminary meetings at COP 28. In 1977, Leonard Peltier, an American Indian movement member from the Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa, was framed up and sentenced to 2 life terms in connection with the deaths of 2 FBI agents, Jack Kohler and Ronald Williams, on South Dakota's Pine Ridge Reservation 2 years earlier. Peltier had been a part of the 1973 Wounded Knee occupation to protest the Oglala Sioux tribe's corrupt government and the federal government's failure to honor treaties. Even the FBI's own ballistics evidence showed that Leonard was not the shooter, but that and other evidence was suppressed by prosecutors at the trial. Yeah, of course. Leonard Peltier is now 79 years young, and in his 48th year of unjust incarceration. For nearly 5 decades, indigenous activists, organizers, and allies have rallied behind the fight to free Leonard Peltier. Between the numerous constitutional violations that took place throughout Leonard Peltier's trial, the outright racism, his ongoing health concerns, and his fragile state as an elder, it's hard to fathom and grasp how we're all still here advocating for his release in Plymouth and other NDOM, where we have used our platform every single year to raise up the unjust incarceration of Leonard. Recently, NDN Collective and Amnesty International USA hosted a Free Leonard Peltier 79th birthday action in Washington, D.C., where hundreds of supporters and allies gathered in front of the White House on Leonard Peltier's 79th birthday. Representative Raul Oglala led a bipartisan bicameral letter requesting clemency for indigenous activist Leonard Peltier and obtained signatures from 33 members of Congress. Former U.S. Attorney James Reynolds handled the prosecution of Mr. Peltier's case. In an extraordinary letter to President Biden, Mr. Reynolds said, "I write today from a position rare for a former prosecutor to beseech you commute the sentence of a man who I helped put behind bars." Leonard remains hopeful that he will return home to North Dakota. Free Leonard Peltier! Free Leonard Peltier! Free Leonard Peltier! Thank you, thank you, thank you. Now this is a letter from him himself. Greetings, my relatives, friends, loved ones, and supporters. Know that my spirit is with you on this day of mourning, honoring a past stained with blood and tears, bearing a hopeful present and victorious future. Since those ships came in 1492, every day has been a day of mourning, and every day has also brought to us the struggle for nothing less than our unconditional liberty. Alcatraz stands as a monument to our struggle. Plymouth Rock, a testament to our resilience. The oppressor has tried to push us to precipice since their arrival, yet we remain. We respond by being who we are and always have been, the first people, caretakers of Mother Earth. She gives us birth, gives us life. Her strength runs through our veins. Her strength is our strength. When our journeys end, we return to her womb. The Creator sets our path before us. We walk that path and we do not retreat. The greed of the colonizers will be their undoing. Colonial society has no real strength. Their money says, "In God we trust." And how apropos? Money is the oppressor's God. They strip Mother Earth bare through their policies of greed and corruption. Never forget our strength comes from giving back, from protecting ourselves, each other, our women, our children, Mother Earth. I've spent most of my life caged, but they cannot cage the soul of a sun dancer. My grandfather taught me a long time ago what I must be and do for my people that can and never will be caged. We are changing the world. Every one of us must grasp what is ours to change. History is not something that happens in a vacuum. History is forged, and forge we will until victorious. At the Battle of Greasy Grass, we are victorious. At Standing Rock, we are victorious. The Black Hills, our sacred site and resistance, we are victorious. Brothers, sisters, two spirits, you know my story. It is the same story since 1492. They contrived to prosecute me with proven fabricated evidence and sentenced me to 2 life sentences to cover up their own wrongdoing. 3 years forth of murder and atrocities against our people. But plant a tree for me, that tree will hold a memory. And like it, you must remember your language. Remember your people. Remember your culture. My liberty is bound to yours. The time is now. We stand together or we perish apart. In the spirit of Crazy Horse, Daksha, Leonard Peltier. Thank you.
So thank you all for coming today. Today is February 7th, 2022. We came here because it's Monday. February 6th, which is yesterday, that is the anniversary of Leonard Peltier's arrest date, and that is the International Day of Solidarity with Leonard Peltier and political prisoners. We're here because we're here to demand the immediate release of Leonard Peltier and the immediate hospitalization of our elder. He is in there Peltier getting COVID inside of the prison. Just several days, if maybe even a week after Leonard Peltier wrote to all of us, begging us for his release, begging for his clemency. And I'm going to read that letter right now. It was written in the Huffington Post. These are Leonard's words. COVID has turned Coleman Prison back to the dark ages. I remember a time at Marion USP when I was put in solidarity for so long, when 72 hours could make you start to forget who you were. I once wrote down who I was on the concrete floor under my bed, so if I forgot, I could read it back to myself. I traded my cigarette for a pencil, my last cigarette for a pencil. I'd rush to the door when a guard left the meager plate of food just to see the glimpse of another human being, even if it was one that hated me. It was another human, and it was good for my mind for a minute. I'm in hell, and there is no way to deal with it but to take it as long as you can. I cling to the belief that people are out there, doing what they can to change our circumstances in here. For the fear and stress are taking a toll on everyone, including the staff. You can see it in their faces and hear it in their voices. The whole institution is on total lockdown. In and out of lockdown last year at least meant a shower every third day, a meal beyond a sandwich, wet with a little peanut butter. But now with COVID for an excuse, nothing. No phone, no window, no fresh air, no humans to gather, no loved ones to voice, no relief. Left alone and without attention is like a torture chamber for the sick and the old. Where are human rights activists? You are hearing from me and with me, many desperate men and women. They are turning an already harsh environment into an asylum. And for many who did not receive a death penalty, we now start staring down the face of one. And help me, my brothers and sisters, help me, my good friends. Leonard Peltier remaining in prison, especially now that he has contacted COVID, is a de facto death sentence for a crime that he didn't do, for a crime that he didn't commit. And this is the nature of this genocidal state. The United States government and every settler occupier, this is their intention, is to suppress us and to kill us and our elders, especially if you are someone with a voice, especially if you are somebody who fights for their people. I might be one day a political prisoner, who knows, because I have the undying love for my people and the land and all of our relatives, and that's ultimately why Leonard is in there, because he was a member of the American Indian movement, and the FBI threw him away to rot in a cell because he was fighting for our people. And that is ultimately the reason why he is in there in the first place. These feds have blood on their hands. Leonard isn't the only political prisoner in there. We are asking that we release all political prisoners in every corner of the world where our freedom fighters are convicted for demanding a dignified life. But I'm interested to hear what our relatives in AIM and the RRC have to say.
Hello, good morning. My name is Norman Patrick Brown. I'm from the nation. I'm son of a I'd like to say thank you to everyone here. I'd like to share with you real briefly, I was the youngest fighter that day. I was 15 years old in Oglala. It was a horrible day. It was a horrific day. We lost a brother, Joe Stuntz. What a kind, beautiful man he was. And I'm sure the two agents too were good people in their own way, in their own family. That day was a very intense day, and through the leadership of Dino Butler and Bob Robidoux, Leonard Peltier, we survived that day. It was a day-long shootout. where we were running out of rounds. And we're completely surrounded by over 300 law enforcement. South Dakota, Nebraska State Police, county sheriffs, Bureau of Indian Affairs, various white vigilantes, and the goon squad. There seemed a time there that there was no hope, that we all were ready to die. Everybody was tired. Everybody was fatigued. We didn't drink any water that day. We didn't eat. It was a horrible humidity. It seemed like the world was against us that day. It seemed like there was no hope left. So we sat down. Some were so tired that they laid down. Some of us were counting how many bullets we had left. It was so depressing. We all looked at each other, knowing that we were willing to die for each other. And why we were there. And why we set up that camp. And why Leonard Peltier led this warrior group there. The elders had come to Farmington that spring. The year before, 7 Navajos were brutally murdered in racist killings. And Leonard Peltier and others came to Farmington to support the Diné people against the racism in Farmington, which was called the Selma, Alabama of the Southwest. He was there among over 3,000, 3,500 AIM members converged to support the Navajo people. It was there that some elders from Pine Ridge came. They talked to the people and said, we need help. They're killing us up there, they're beating us, they're shooting at us. Our people are being assassinated. We can't go to the BIA police, we can't go to the tribe because they're the ones that are the vigilantes, they're the goon squads. We can't go to the FBI because they're training and arming with automatic weapons, the vigilante group, the goon squad. Where are all the warriors? We need help up there. Guess who spoke first? It was Leonard Peltier. Aunties, we'll go up there. And there began the journey to go up to Oglala. And I was very fortunate to be a part of that. At 15, they were telling me, you're too young, little brother. You can't go. I said, I want to go, man. There's a few of us young people. So we decided that we were going to go up there. While we were up there, a lot of the traditional people came to our camps. A lot of the traditional leaders, the grassroots Lakotas, Oglalas. As we were there, the movement on the Pine Ridge Reservation became strong. People started shooting back. Wherever there was shootings, our brothers went there. So we were a security force. And that's why they came into our camp. We believe that the FBI started building up their numbers there. We believe that this was provoked because of the stronghold there at Jumping Bull Ranch. I'd like to thank the grandparents, Jumping Bulls, for inviting us. On that day, 2 FBI agents came into that territory, and a shootout happened, and they lost their lives. And today, even many of us mourn for them. I do. They were human beings. No one ever talks about Joe, who shot him. But all this I want to share with you is that we were there. Leonard led us for a just cause. He led us there. The traditional people, they wanted to install their own government. Right after Wounded Knee, there was a reign of terror where dozens and dozens of people had gotten killed, assassinated, beaten, stabbed, and shot at. It was that reign of terror that provoked Leonard and others and us to go up there. While we were up there, the spiritual power of the Lakota people was evident. And we all had ceremonies there. It was a good feeling, good time. So when that day happened, it was a sad day. 46 years later, I'm 61. There's very few of us from that day. There were 7 of us that faced over 300 of them. As we were there on the ground, figuring out what we were going to do, the sun was going down. What are we going to do? And all of a sudden, an eagle came from the south side. It landed on a tree. When he landed on that tree, the tree went like this. And the eagle was steadying itself. And it stopped. And it took off. It went south. And that tree went like this. And that's what Leonard said. Let's go. Let's follow that eagle. And boy, man, we got up. We were full of life again. We were exhausted. And as we were following that eagle's trail, there was a creek. Instead of going around it, we went straight through that creek. As we were halfway out, we saw the sisters. Jean, Milak, Lena Funston. And it is true that the women give you power. They give you strength. When we saw them, they filled us, they hugged us, they thanked us, they encouraged us. Let's get out of here. We're with you. We're going to be free from here. And from there, we escape up into the mountains. So I just want to share that with you. Just want to share that day with you. I'd like to do an honor song for all the brothers, the unsung heroes of the American Indian movement who have passed on. Thousands and thousands of security warriors, brothers and sisters. I'd like to sing this song for Joe Stentz and all the Lakota warriors and brothers of the 70s that are no longer with us. I'd like to sing this song for my brother Leonard, for Dino Butler, Bob Robidoux, Baby Ann, Mike Anderson, Wishy Draper, my dear, beautiful, strong sister Jean Roach. I'd like to sing this. Yeah, thank the Red Nations and Albuquerque AIM to see our young people, especially our women, lead this movement. I so honor you, for I come from a matriarchal society. For my boss, my leaders were my grandmas, my aunties, my mom, my older sisters. So when the women leaders ask me to do something, I say how high and how fast. So let's continue to honor our sisters and our aunties and our grandmas. For without them, our nations would falter. Our nations would be weak. I just wanted to say that to all of you. You young women, you impress me in the most beautiful way. Thank you for your voice. Thank you for bringing us here. Thank you for speaking on my behalf, of our people's behalf. May you all grow old, long life and happiness. Thank you, and one more thing, I'd like to thank Jim Reynolds. He's a former prosecuting attorney who convicted Leonard. You know, I really want to thank him. There is someone with a heart. There is someone who cares about humanity. Senator Patrick Leahy, who came out with a powerful statement. Jerry Adams from the Irish Republic. Senator Schatz. And all the Native American legislators that joined together asking Leonard to be free. I'd like to thank Carol Koke, the head of the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. Gene Roach, former federal judge. Kevin Sharp, who's Leonard's attorney. He's going to be free. We know it. He might be free tomorrow, maybe next week, but he is free. My grandma told me, son, he's going to be free. He's going to walk back. He's going to walk out of those doors. He's going to go to his land. Believe it, speak it, be it. So thank you.
Thank you so much. It's a beautiful story. Our elder, Norman Patrick Brown, he's taught us so much and has always guided us through this work about Peltier. And I want to commend him and thank him for all his courage, just at only 15 years old, going out and fighting for all of us. It's beautiful, and I hope that we can continue to walk in his footsteps. This is the 6th year that we've come out on this day, or actually on the 6th is when we come out. And we come out every year, sometimes in front of the council chambers, but usually right here. And we come right here because this is one of the only federal buildings where we know these feds are here, and we know that they can hear us, and we know that when they come out on their lunch break, they're gonna have to pass by us, right? We're talking to them. We're talking to these feds because this is what represents the power that keeps Leonard incarcerated. This is what represents the power that keeps Native people down. And so this is why we come out here and we reclaim our space here on Tiwa territory. These are our streets, and this is Native land. But as we've been talking, we need to remember that Leonard Peltier represents all political prisoners in their struggles, and they acknowledge him, just like our elder just said. All the way in Ireland, with the Irish, the IRA, the Irish Republican Party, they acknowledge him, and they're also fighting colonialism. They're fighting for their land. They're fighting for their people who get assassinated by the British, and they have long been in solidarity with Leonard Peltier. They have a mural of Leonard Peltier in Free Derry. And in Palestine, our Palestinian relatives relatives acknowledge Leonard Peltier, and they acknowledge that his struggle is in line with all of the political prisoners who are still in Israeli prisons today. The fight for Leonard Peltier is a fight for all indigenous people all across the world, and people recognize him as a symbol of that struggle, as a symbol for decolonization, as a symbol of the way people are martyred. When they locked up Peltier, as we just heard, that day there was so many people. And they targeted him. He did not shoot those two feds. He was scapegoated. He was made to be an example of what happens when we rise up. By what they're doing to Leonard, they're trying to break all of our spirit. But here we are over 40 years later, still coming out for him, still hitting the streets, and our hearts are still on fire. Because we're never going to stop fighting for Peltier, and we're never going to stop fighting for our people. We're never going to stop fighting for our lands and our water and our children and our elders. They say that settler colonialism is an ongoing project. It never ends. And that means our resistance to it is never ending. We're simply taking up the fights and the struggles that we've been fighting since settlers first arrived here. And Leonard knows that. And I want him to know that there's still people with all their hearts and their souls praying and fighting every day for you, Leonard. Leonard and every other political prisoner out there unjustly imprisoned for no reason, made to scare the rest of us from protecting our people. But it's not gonna work. It only ignites us more. Just the other day on the news, Leonard Peltier's lawyer, for the first time I ever heard in my lifetime, boldly proclaimed that Leonard did not kill those two feds.
That's right.
We need to drop that lie. We need to fight that anytime it comes up because it's not true. He said that when he saw his case, he was so heartbroken and so disturbed that he immediately decided to represent him pro bono because of the blatant and obvious injustice in his case, because of the way evidence was hidden and fabricated. For the first time that I've seen on national television, he proclaimed that the FBI had been training and working with goon squads and white vigilantes. This is public knowledge that needs to be known. This is something that legally his lawyers are continuing to uphold because it's just the truth. There's absolutely no reason that Leonard Peltier should be behind bars right now. There's no reason. And so for this, we continue to fight. We continue to fight for him and for everybody who's unjustly imprisoned. We continue to fight for Leonard and for all our people, not only in physical prisons, but everybody who's imprisoned by border town violence, right? The way we can't even move freely on our own lands. And that's why this happened. That's why this started. Because we're fighting border town violence. Because Leonard fought border town violence. Because our elders here were fighting border town violence since before we were born. And it continues today when we see the police or the vigilantes harass our relatives, harass our unsheltered relatives. This is what we're fighting for, and that's why the Red Nation exists. So thank you so much for being with us today, because this is a long, ongoing fight. And I know that we're going to continue to be strong, and I think we're even going to be stronger. I feel good things for this year.
Yup.
I think it's going to be a hot, hot summer like we saw in 2020.
Yup.
So be prepared, and we'll always be here to stand beside you and fight with you. That's why the Red Nation exists. May we pray with all our heart and all our spirit that Leonard gets to return to his beautiful homeland and be with his family, surrounded by love, with his spirits again. May Leonard Peltier be free, and may his freedom ring and give hope to all who are wrongfully incarcerated. May Leonard Peltier's freedom give us a push for strength everywhere, whether we're talking about Palestinian liberation or the liberation of colonized people everywhere. This is what we fight for, and we're strong, even when it's hard, even when it doesn't seem like it, because I know we've been dealing with some dark times. I know people are struggling personally. So let us give some of our strength to Leonard right now.
Woo!
them here, free them there, free, free, Leonard Peltier.
Free them here, free them there, free, free, Leonard Peltier.
Free them here, free them there,
free, free, Leonard Peltier.
free them here, free them there,
Free, free, Leonard Peltier.
free them here, free them there,
Free, free, Leonard Peltier.